Heading east from Colorado, I spent a week in the Columbia, Missouri area. Once again then, heading east, I found myself in Bloomington, Illinois, for a lovely visit with Nancy and Don Erickson. At South Hill in India, our families had lived in the same apartment building. I spent that night in the driveway of Paul and Joanna Adair. Paul and my Sally were first cousins. That evening, Joanna served up a wonderful meal for the whole family. On to Detroit, where I stayed in the driveway of Rugh Bergier. We traveled together to Sault Ste. Marie, where we met her classmates Mary Self Skarsten, Joy Finney, and Rachel Ryan for the Agwa Canyon train tour. I'll leave the link for the video that I have already produced below. We had purchased our tickets 3 months earlier while speculating on when the fall colors would be at their peak. We were spot on. The trees were spectacular. The following day, on our way to Toronto, we stopped in the afternoon for chai at a gas station. We didn't grow up in India for nothing and knew how to do things upright. Henry was honored when first Mary and then Rachel wanted their pictures taken with Henry. In Toronto, we had a lovely evening at the Virgins. Their father was a missionary doctor serving in Ludhiana, India at the medical college. Back in Detroit, I helped Kim with a log splitting project, which left her with ample firewood for the winter. I then continued to head east to my final destination in Maine. The closest driving distance to Maine took me back into Canada for my 4th border crossing of the year. I had not anticipated a 2-hour delay at the border crossing back into the United States at Niagara. However, the slow-moving line on the bridge to the United States gave me plenty of time to photograph the falls from my driver's seat in Henry. From my vantage point, I could see both the Canadian and the U.S. falls. The water was thundering at both, with the spray rising up almost as high as the falls themselves. 45 minutes before arriving at my campsite for the night, I started having engine trouble and was glad to have reached the night's destination. The next morning, I headed to Utica, New York. There, Mike was happy to diagnose the problem as being 2 misfiring cylinders. He ordered 2 ignition coils, which would be delivered by UPS in the morning. Engine trouble is, understandably, a part of the nomadic adventure. If not for engine trouble, I would not have seen the prettiest campsite in my travels so far where I spent the night. It was tea time, so I made a cup of chai and sat down by the river to enjoy it. As soon as I sat down, 3 ducks that had been swimming in the river darted up to where I was sitting. Obviously, they had begged for food from previous campers, so I shared my chips. The next day, it rained while driving all day. However, it did not downpour until I got to the outskirts of Boston. Since I could hardly see to drive, I pulled off at the next exit and into the driveway of the very first motel I came to, which was a Red Roof Inn. It also rained the next day. Fortunately for me, Woodstock School classmate Scott Swanson and her husband Ron lived in town. I spent the next 2 days with them. They lived next to a conservation area where Sue and I enjoyed a fall walk. The next day, Sue took me to Lexington and Concord for a history refresher. Our tour guide not only took us to where the shot heard around the world was fired, but gave us a rundown on the whole Revolutionary War. Ron and I had fun watching their grandson's baseball team take to the field. The three of us enjoyed a delicious Indian meal and many hours of visiting. Now on to classmate Mark Wagner's cabin in Eastport, Maine. Eastport, Maine is about as far east in the United States as one can go. Except for some help with lifting roofing materials, he built the cabin all by himself. I had been invited for a visit many times in the past 25 years and was happy to finally be there. We enjoyed many hours of visiting. Supper by kerosene lamplight reminded each of us of the villages in India where we had grown up. One evening, the sunset was spectacular. Mark took me across the border to Campobello Island for my 5th entry into Canada for the year. We walked along a blustery but beautiful beach, collecting ocean-smooth stones as we went along. We also visited the Roosevelt Campobello International Park, where Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt built their summer home. I was interested that an American president would build his summer home in Canada. I have always enjoyed seeing lighthouses, and this one was extra special. We ended the day with a famous Maine lobster dinner. These days with Mark were good, but some good things must come to an end. And I turned Henry westward once again.